I have an important update for you in this video, and it is about JSON LD, which is Google's new preferred schema format. At least at the recording of this video, it's the new preferred schema format. And as I jokingly put it here, Google has a new favorite, so you have a new favorite. Now, for those of you who are totally familiar with schema and rich snippets and the reasons for having schema, Google's knowledge panel and knowledge graph and all this stuff, then I apologize for bearing the lead. But for anybody who's watching this and it's kind of their introduction into schema information, I just want to do a real brief explanation of what schema is. And this is schema.org, and basically schema.org decides about the proper format for a certain type of markup that can go in your website code that allows machines, so bots that are crawling sites and stuff, to more easily understand the information that's on your site. And Google and Bing and Yahoo and other search engines have all agreed that they are going to support understanding the data on your site based on the schema.org specs. And so schema.org, if I go into, for example, schemas, and I could show you an example of a person. I'm going to scroll way down to examples, but basically there's a bunch of these item scope, item type, item prop stuff. It's microdata. This is an example of the type of code that can go into a site that's going to allow a machine like a bot or something to understand this better. And if you've watched the videos, other videos I have on schema data, you are going to, this is going to be really familiar because I talk a lot about microdata. But JSON LD is another type of markup that can go on your site, and it's been there all the time, but more recent. And so this is an example of what the JSON LD looks like. And so all of these are valid. The microdata, RDFA, JSON LD, those are all different examples of ways that you can mark it up. They're all on schema.org as official proper ways to go, and you can use any of them. But in Google's developers website, in their section about structured data, they have some things to say about these different formats. They talk about microdata and RDFA as what they do, and then they talk about JSON LD, and they say some interesting things. One is that it is the newest and simplest markup format. It talks about how it goes, and since the data does not have to be interleaved with user visible text, it is easier to express nested data items. And so then down here it says that for any knowledge graph related features, site-link search boxes, event-rich snippets, and recipe-rich snippets, Google recommends the use of JSON LD. Okay, there are a few rich snippet types where Google still recommends the use of microdata and RDFA, so I do recommend that you go to developers.google.com and look up the structured data section and just check and make sure that this is still what Google is saying, because depending on when you watch this video, this information does change as Google keeps working. But right now, Google is basically recommending JSON LD as its preferred format for most types of schema data. So in the videos that I have about schema and about marking up your site with schema, I talk almost exclusively about microdata. That was my preferred method. It was the method that made the most sense and I thought was the most understandable. It's also the method that had the best WordPress plugin, and so I was recommending that. But at this point, if you can, if it's possible to make changes, it is possible that you're going to see better results in terms of getting rich snippets and having Google understand your data if you use JSON LD. Now, I want to talk to you about Schema Creator. One of the reasons that I really liked micro formats is because this WordPress plugin, Schema Creator, was a plugin I found that I really liked that made it very easy to add microdata to your site. And I still recommend Schema Creator if you need to use a WordPress plugin in order to add schema data to your site. it does use microdata and not JSON LD, but if you don't have a developer to help you with JSON LD, then and you're looking just for ease of use, then Schema Creator is still a totally valid plugin to use. So you may see this in a lot of videos I have about structured data and schema, and it's okay to still use this, but you should know that it uses specifically the microdata format. If I go back over here, it uses specifically this microdata format, while Google's preference now is leaning now towards the JSON LD format. There are a lot of reasons that Google prefers that, and I expect we'll probably start seeing some more WordPress plugins out there that are going to be supporting JSON LD. It's actually a little bit easier to do, to add JSON LD, and that's, I think, one of the reasons that Google likes it. It's simpler to insert into a page. It's not as intrusive in the HTML. And because it's JavaScript, there are a number of different ways that it can be added in. So these are things that don't necessarily matter to you, but they will matter to a developer who's working on your site. So those are some things to know about microdata versus JSON LD. You can still use Schema Creator, but you should know that it uses microdata, and it is possible that you might get better results if you use JSON LD. Google at least is saying that it is their preferred format for most knowledge graph related features. Okay. Now, I did a Google search for JSON LD generator, and there are some JSON LD generators that come up. In particular, this one, jamesdflynn.com. I liked this one a lot. I think this is a pretty solid. It's easy to use. You choose which thing you want to create schema for. As you type things in, it just adds it in, right? You can see it adding there on the side there. So anyway, there are going to be JSON LD markup generators out there. You can copy this code and paste it into your website. Now this piece of JavaScript can be added basically anywhere in your website. The places I've seen it used, it's actually right in the body of the website. Anywhere you want, right actually in the body of the code. But you may want to have a developer do this for you in order to make sure that it's working well with your website, that it's not messing with any other JavaScript, that it's placed at a good point where it's going to execute properly and stuff like that. But the other main thing that I want to warn you about when using JSON LD, and a difference between JSON LD and microdata, is that microdata was a markup, it still is, of course, a markup that actually marks up the visible text on the page. So this is the code that's behind the scenes. But if you were to see this page, you would actually see the words Jane Doe. You would actually see the words professor and the address and stuff like that. You would actually see those on the page, and then the markup is in the code behind the scenes, sort of surrounding that stuff that is visible to you as a user. And so the two are sort of directly connected, which is one of the reasons that makes microdata a little more complicated to add to a page, is that it has to actually be around these things. Now, JSON LD is not that way. It's a piece of script that has all the data in it, and you just stick it in wherever you want. But the important thing is this. Google does not want you to add content to your JSON LD schema structured data that is not actually visible on the page. And because the two are separate, it's possible that it could accidentally be done. And so if I'm, creating this JSON LD script here, and I'm adding my name and a job title like this and a URL and an address, I need to then also make sure that those things are visible to a user on the page, because your site can get penalized for spammy use of structured data if your JSON LD markup is on your page with different information than is actually visible to a user on your page. So that's the one warning I want to give you about using JSON LD. One thing that makes it more complicated is that, at least right now, you kind of have to be adding this code yourself. You have to find a generator like this and add it onto your page. If you are using WordPress, I have not yet found any really solid WordPress plugins um, that insert JSON LD in the way that I would like them to. They either don't give you enough control or they don't validate correctly when you once the structured data is added that Google can't read them correctly. I think we will see some WordPress plugins being developed that are going to really be solid and work well, inserting JSON LD into into WordPress pages with a lot of control. But right now, I think it's a little new to people. So you'll need to do something like this. If you're a web developer, or have your web developer add that JSON LD code right onto your page. But just as I said, make sure that any information you include in your JSON LD structured data is also added visibly on the site to users. Um, and the last thing, this is true no matter what you're using to insert, no matter what format of schema structured data you're adding, no matter what tools you're using to create it, always make sure that you use Google's structured data testing tool once you have inserted the data in. And so if you just search Google for a structured data testing tool, it's probably the first thing that's going to come up. And basically all you need to do is you will take the URL that you have the structured data on. You're going to click Fetch URL. You're going to enter it in here and click Fetch and Validate. And then it will give you, in fact, I'll use my own site as an example. And then you click Fetch and Validate. And then it will give you, if you have any errors, it will say like 1 error, 2 errors, something like that. And you can actually click down and see and make sure all your data looks good, that it's reading all that data the way you want it to. But always use that structured data testing tool to make sure that Google can properly read the structured data on your site. It's a great tool. So JSON LD, get used to it. I'm hoping that we'll start seeing some really solid WordPress plugins soon that are going to make this easier. But if you have a web developer who can help you with this, then I would recommend starting to migrate your microdata markup over to JSON LD markup. Any other videos you see, if I'm talking about microdata, you can just assume same information, but use JSON LD. If you must use a WordPress plugin, or if I recommend a WordPress plugin and you don't have a way to add JSON LD, if I recommend Schema Creator in a video and you don't have a web developer who can help you with JSON LD, you can totally still use this. Just know that eventually you're going to want to start migrating over to JSON LD. Once you've got, whether it's microdata or JSON LD structured data in there, definitely test it with Google Structured Data Testing tool and make sure you're all good to go. And you are going to be really feeding really good, solid data to the search engines in the way that they want to read it.